Hello, good day everybody. This recording is not done in a soundproof room, so you may hear noises from outside. Okay, just bear with it. Alright, so today we are going to talk about individual learner differences in second language acquisition. Why is it important for us to understand or to have adequate knowledge about individual learner differences? One of the main reasons is that actually we are all different. We have different personality, we have different characteristics, we have different motivation, language attitude, language ability, and so on. Yeah. So, why we need to study individual learner differences? The reason is very simple. Because we need to understand our learners, and also we need to understand ourselves as teachers. So by studying individual learner differences, I hope we later can demonstrate our awareness of individual learner differences in language instruction. Remember, we are students of the education stream, and very likely we will be language teachers, we will be lecturers, we will also be material developers. So I hope we will be able to demonstrate our awareness of individual learner differences when we design materials and when we implement our design materials or in our actual learning teaching processes in the teaching of English or other languages. When we study individual learner differences, there are 4 questions that we usually want to address. The first question is, in what ways do language learner differ? In what way? We probably are not really aware of this. We may think that all learners are the same and we treat them in the same way. It shows that we are not aware of individual learner differences. The second question is, what effects do individual learner differences have on the learning outcome? Remember, we may look at our class. Do we have the same English language proficiency? Probably not. Yeah. Our TOEFL scores when we started studying at this university differed considerably. And probably our language proficiency now also differ. Yeah? This shows that ILD have some effect on the learning outcome. Another questions that ILD address is, how do ILDs affect the process or the processes of second language acquisition? We will have a look later on the ILTs, yeah, and how they affect language acquisition. The next question to address is how do individual learner factors interact with instruction in determining learning outcomes. All right, so these 4 questions, if you are interested, you can choose any of these 4 and conduct research in any of these areas. Or we can think about them in relation to instructional design, in relation to instructional materials designs and development. All right. Now let's move to the next point. Individual learner differences and what aspects of SLA ILTs can influence. There are 4 areas in which ILTs influence our SLA. The first is that ILTs influence the processes of SLA, particularly in constructing interlanguages. We all know, aware of what interlanguage is, and that everyone has its own interlanguage, and how interlanguage is constructed within or by an individual learner might differ because of the influence of individual learner differences. Still, in relation with the development or the construction of interlanguages, ILTs also influence the rate of language acquisition. Those with good language aptitude will probably acquire a second language much faster than those who have relatively not as good language aptitude. The next thing that is influenced by ILTs is the ultimate level of achievement. The ultimate level of achievement. Some students may achieve native-like competence or proficiency. Some or many will never achieve that level. So let's look at the students in our classes or our own students. We see that in our English classes, usually we have mixed abilities. Students with different levels of proficiency, meaning that the level of achievement of the language differs considerably. And then also an area which is influenced by ILT is second language performance. How individual performs in listening, in speaking, in reading, and also in writing, yeah, as well as, for example, in translating text and also in interpreting. So ILTs very likely will influence our performance in this case. All right. Now we will focus our attention on the ILTs themselves. The ILTs that we will have a look now concerns two things. One is beliefs and the other is learner factors. Let us start with beliefs. When we talk about beliefs, beliefs about what? All right, first is belief about language. Different students will very likely have different beliefs about language. Some students may see language as linguistic resources or as resources for making meaning. So meaning is most important aspect of language because that is what we study language for. To express meaning, to understand the meaning expressed by other people through language. Some students may believe that language is basically grammar. So when they study language, they study the grammar. That language is rule governed, so the rule is very important. They focus on the rule and hope that by mastering the rules, they believe they master the language. So it can be meaning, making, resources. It can be rule governed. Also, beliefs about language learning, for example. It depends on our understanding of what learning is. In the old days, behaviorism believed that language learning is basically habit formation. So this is what is called behaviorism. And then in behaviorism, there are three aspects which are very important. Stimulus, response, and reinforcement. So language learning should involve these three elements. The stimulus, the response, the reinforcement. If we still remember or if we have read or studied audiolingual method, then probably we will see. I myself, when studying at this university at the undergraduate level, adopted this belief. For example, we have what is called pattern practice. We practice the English sentence patterns mechanically, using the SRR, stimulus response reinforcement. For example, this is a book. This is the model, the pattern. And then the teacher will say pencil. And the students in unison will say, this is a pencil. This is a pencil is the response. If the teacher says nothing, then that can be considered as positive reinforcement. So stimulus, response, or rewards or reinforcement is the standard practice for behaviorism. But now things are different. Things are different. We probably remember Crescent's learning acquisition hypothesis. We understand the affective filter hypothesis. We understand the input hypothesis. Or we have studied, for example, input, interaction, and output. We know input hypothesis, we know output hypothesis, we know interaction hypothesis. So